Hi everyone, welcome to episode 10 of The Green Room. Nick, what are you going to give us this week on the number 10? Have you got anything?
Hello, James.
Hi.
Well, this week we're going to do things a little bit differently. So we've got questions and answers by some of our listeners and people calling in to speak to us.
We're giving the answers.
We're giving the answers, yeah, absolutely. People asking the questions. So a lot of confusion out there about different energy saving technologies.
So we've got 14 questions here. And so I guess we just run through them one by one.
Yes.
But before we get started, have you had a good week?
I've had it's been so-and-so, actually.
Really?
So-and-so, yeah. It's
Why
been.
Did you enjoy the sun last week? Did you enjoy the brief
sun
of springtime?
Sun was good, but it's all gone. We're back to seasonal averages.
Yeah.
So that's it's good to hear. So I just want things to go really gently. Actually, I don't want it to be too hot. It's not good. Let's give summer its due time. So let's enjoy the early spring. And and hopefully it can get warmer and warmer as we head into those long days. But anyway, more pressing things. Let's get on with the questions.
Okay. So we've got 14 questions here. I haven't really had a look at them yet, but let us go through them one by one. So question 1 is from Mark, who isn't from Milton Keynes. I'm not probably going to name them all, but what is the difference between solar PV and solar thermal?
So the main difference is, one, solar PV is there to generate electricity, and solar thermal pumps water through a vacuum essentially on the roof, uses the same sun energy, but actually generates hot water.
Okay, so solar thermal hot water, solar PV electricity.
Solar PV electricity.
And you need, typically, when you're putting solar thermal panel, because it's not panels normally on a roof, it only needs to be one little panel. Yeah, it doesn't take up nearly as much space as solar PV.
It's a few square meters compared to a panel system can be, 12 panels, and that can take pretty much most of your roof space. So
there's a big old difference in space.
Yes, and also solar PV, quite importantly, is a standalone installation because it's electrical. So, the electrician will go there, will wire it up to your consumer unit, whereas the solar thermal, you might need to actually do some work to your plumbing.
Yeah, so it's a bit more of a big operation, I guess.
Yes.
Okay, and if you were to do one or t'other, which would you do?
I'd probably go solar PV, but only if I was doing a self build and I was starting from scratch, I'd do solar PV.
Yeah, I think solar PV is good because with electricity you can also produce hot water via
you can,
immersion.
Yes, yeah, and importantly, you can get a bit of an export tariff kick. So so if you produce excess, you earn a bit of money.
So feed-in tariff for solar PV.
Yes.
There is the renewable heat incentive for solar thermal, but not nearly as generous. Anyway, right, okay, so that's it. So solar PV produces electricity, solar thermal produces hot water.
Do you want to do the second question?
Far away.
So how do I know if I have a cavity wall and whether or not it is insulated? And it comes from Philip Shaw, Birdlip. It's a small town. I don't know where that is.
Okay, so Philip, when you look at the wall, I'm gonna use the word stretcher bond here. Is that the right terminology? Yes. Okay, so basically, when I'm looking at a wall, if I can see lots of long bricks, so if you look at some walls, you'll see little half bricks, and if you look at other walls, you'll see just lots of long bricks, and that's called stretcher bond. Basically, if you see long bricks, it means it's a cavity wall, and if you see the little half bricks, it's a solid wall. And what that half brick is basically the brick at 90 degrees to the rest of the wall, and it's tying two skins of brick together. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Have I made that?
Yep.
To tell if it's insulated, you need to look really closely, and you'll see lots of little. Typically, you will see lots of little circle sort of dots across the wall within the mortar joints, and that is where they have been drilled and retrofitted. If it was built relatively recently and had cavity wall insulation put in, when it was built, it is much, much more difficult to see. You potentially can go into the eaves of the property, so up into your loft and have a look down, and potentially you'll be able to see some insulation in there. Otherwise, you need to get someone in to come and put a borescope. So they drill a hole into the wall and they put a little camera in there, and it goes round and has a look.
And regulations typically change mid-80s for cavity walls. And not to say that they're all being filled, because there's ways to reach those regulations at the time, but it's quite likely that we'll have some form of cavity wall insulation if it was built after the mid-80s.
Yeah. So basically, when you're looking at it, you're looking for to see the long brick pattern on the walls, and if you're looking to see if it's been retrofitted with insulation, you'll see little mortar marks, little circular drill holes across the wall. Right, question 3 from someone from South London, Tarek. Right, how can I find out my boiler's efficiency level?
And quite a nifty thing, we've actually written a whole article on it. But before I get into the article, it's quite a geeky admission to make. So I always used to, when I was in my EPC assessor days, I always used to go into the SAP tool, which is a tool that all EPC assessors use, and you can go through the tables. So
how would your Joe blogs find that?
I think there's an external website. For some reason, my cursor's not working here, so I can't get you the precise answer. So
is it Sedbuck or something? www.
Sedbuck, yeah.
Sedbuck.
Can't quite click on this.
We'll pop it in the description.
We'll pop it in the description. Can you just check that and see if it is? Because then I can give a URL.
Yes, but I mean, just while we're kind of talking about boiler efficiency levels, obviously over time they've improved.
Yeah.
And combi boilers, but not combi boilers, but condensing boilers are the newest generation of gas boilers, and they typically 87% and above efficiency.
Yeah, and so what they're doing is they're reusing the exhaust heat, so it's normally thrown out as waste heat, and they basically reclaim some of that heat and use it to preheat the water going to the boiler. So they're very, very efficient now.
So okay, so to precisely give the folks the address, if you go to www.ncm-hyphen-pcdb.org.uk,
you'll be able to find
/SAP/PCDB search. Actually, we'll give you the link at the
that
end.
might be easier, actually, Nick. That might, as much as I enjoyed you giving that URL.
But anyway, once you click through the URL, you will get onto a page as such. I'll probably kind of show it. Maybe
this will be good for everyone listening on the podcast.
Everyone there.
You show
screen. And then obviously, on here you've got all different options. You can go by manufacturer, and then hopefully that will you can drill down to the detail. To the precise boiler that you've got. And how do you find out what your boiler make is? What's the trick?
The logo on the front.
Exactly. And if you can't see on the front, it's usually underneath or it's somewhere on.
But don't. If you need to get a screwdriver out to try and find the make of it, I wouldn't.
But also sometimes they put the second sticker onto your instruction guide as well.
They do that occasionally, and the instruction guide should normally say who makes it.
Yeah.
But in essence, if you have a very old boiler, it's probably going to be running more inefficiently than a new boiler. But how old it is, sort of dictates how efficient it is, typically. But the big change was when condensing boilers came in. I'm really glad you read out that URL, and I'm really glad it was long and had lots of different bits to it.
Thank you.
Because I imagine no one will be able to find that website.
Yeah.
Excellent. Right. Are free solar panels a good idea?
Serena in Edinburgh. I think, well, in principle, yes, but the problem is because normally the companies that were giving off, so essentially what are free solar panels? So it's effectively like a rent-a-roof scheme. So a company would come in, then install the solar PV system in there for free, because the company then would effectively have your roof space for those panels for the period of 20, 25 years, whatever the contract is.
So they take the feed-in tariff. So they get the government payments.
And they take that. But I think now, because the feed-in tariffs they've been so suppressed, I'm not sure how many free solar schemes are out there, whether they work at all.
No, so I think that's the key. So if you are offered free solar panels, just find out what the basis is. If someone is going to own your roof for 25 years, I would probably think twice. We get loads and loads of questions on this about people who are struggling to sell properties that have free solar panels on them, and they're struggling to get new mortgages and that sort of thing. I would give it a very wide berth if I were you.
Yes.
But that being said, if in your local borough they offer free solar panels and it's completely paid for, and
it's an actual grant.
Exactly.
Yes.
If it's money for you to get it, then absolutely bite their hand off, because you get free electricity and you'll get some payments from the government. So it's worth doing there. And we're talking about solar PV here specifically, so producing electricity.
Okay, so question from Emma: is external wall insulation dangerous? Quite wide.
Yeah.
What dangerous? What do you define by danger? I suppose
I imagine that question
Blocking
stems. Well, no, I imagine it stems more from the Grenfell fire.
Well, what I'd say is, there's a video on that we did on external insulation versus cladding systems. So external insulation systems are different to cladding systems in a sense that external wall insulation systems, by their nature they use plaster-based or cement-based adhesives, so they effectively seal that insulation on the property walls. So the insulation materials, in theory, should not be exposed to external elements. So if you try to ignite them, it would be extremely difficult to do so.
They would melt within this.
And if you have mineral wool, so say an A1 class insulation material, then effectively you're getting a non-combustible system as well.
Often people don't think you can get mineral wool on your external walls.
Yes.
Do you want to
So
explain that briefly?
it's not like we talked a lot about loft insulation in episode 9. Yeah, it's very much different. The boards are highly compressed, so actually that they are slabs, essentially quite heavy duty slabs that you put onto the walls, which means then when the system is finished, you can actually run a trowel onto them and actually put the finish effectively on the surface.
And that's a completely non-combustible material.
Even the EPS systems are absolutely fine because they are certified, they are fire tested, and they're extremely difficult to ignite.
Yeah.
Because essentially they're encased in this plaster-based concrete adhesive.
So I think that's the key here. So external wall insulation is a system that is tied to the wall. It's very different to the cladding system.
And just a comment maybe on the ventilation side, as I mentioned previously. So it's important that whenever a system is installed, that all the necessary vents are sleeved and extended. So when the system is installed, you're not changing the air movement or making it worse.
Yeah. And lots of people get external wall insulation to solve condensation. Mm-hmm. And condensation is normally solved by behavioural changes. Because there's hot, moist air that finds a cold spot to condense on. So obviously the external wall insulation will mean that the walls are kind of warmer, so the hot, moist air won't condense there, but it's still there and it's still there present in the house. So you might need more vents, you might need to open windows and things during showers and baths and when you're cooking, or you can put in additional vents when you're installing external wall insulation. But I think the kind of condensation thing is obviously there's behavioural changes that can help get rid of it. Yeah? Okay. Go on then.
Gosh, the next one's really controversial. So is it cheaper to keep my heating on all the time, presumably, versus turning it on and off?
Yes, because obviously if you have it on all the time, then it's going to be expensive.
So we a few years ago have an extremely popular post that we get a kind of a 50-50 split of people commenting on what they...
Shall I give you the theory behind it, and then you can tell me if it's true or not?
I can give you the opinion, yeah.
Okay, right. So we stated, and I think this is fair, it depends on the rate at which heat leaves the property. So if you have a well-insulated house, it is cheaper to just leave your heating on all the time. So you set your thermostat at 21 degrees, and it will just keep the house at 21 degrees, and your heating will basically just stay on. If you have a house that has really badly insulated walls, so sort of a pre-1930s solid wall property, so heat loss is very, very high. It is better, in our opinion, you'll save more money to turn your heating on as and when you need it. So potentially for an hour in the morning, when you wake up until you go out, and then in the evening from say 5 o'clock. Just because the rate of heat loss is so high, if you try and maintain that temperature through the day, your boiler has to work in overtime. Mm-hmm. So that is kind of my 2 pennies worth.
Yeah, and I suppose that's very dependent upon the fabric of the house, because obviously if you've got a newer house and you're going to have better insulation, so it's potentially better at retaining that heat. So, but then folks that comment on, I'm just looking at the blog post. We've got loads of comments. people just saying,
you're talking rubbish.
It's not my house. It's not my house. I keep it on all the time, and it's absolutely fine. I think it's going back to the kind of gas electricity point. So if you've got gas, even if you keep it on all the time, it's more likely to, cost-wise perspective, to be lower than say if you got electric heating. Electric heating would be extremely expensive in an uninsulated property, so that would be the worst.
And you can run a test. right? So you could take your energy meter reading. So take 2 winter months that tend to be cold. So say we do January and February, or January and December. January. So in December, you take a meter reading at the beginning of December, and then you put your thermostat on, so it's set temperature all through the month. And then at the end of the month, you take another meter reading. That's how much heating you've used, so if you're electricity or gas, right? Then you do the same thing in January, but you heat differently. So you heat it as and when. So you have maybe with a programmer, you have an hour on in the morning, a few hours in the evening. Now, provided the temperatures aren't massively different during those 2 months, it should give you a pretty positive view of the best way to go there in terms of whether to keep the heating on all the time or just turn it on as and when required. So hopefully that clears up that one.
Cool. So should I replace my conventional boiler with a combi boiler or a combination boiler?
So combi boilers. So basically what you're doing away with there is a hot water tank. And the cold water tanks typically in the roof as well if you've got an unvented system.
And this is the context that we're providing here.
So if I was in a flat and I was looking to save space, a combi boiler is really good. The big requirement for a combi boiler is decent water pressure. Because if you have rubbish water pressure, your combi boiler won't do anything. It won't work very well. And with a combi boiler, when you run a hot water tap, if you run a hot water tap in another room, it splits the feed. So you can get really weak showers and that sort of thing. Whereas if you have a conventional boiler, then if it's gravity-fed conventional boiler, you have pumps between showers and that sort of thing. You maybe can get 2 decent showers running off it. To be honest, I would, if I had a conventional boiler in a biggish house, I would stick with my conventional boiler. If I have a combi boiler in my house, I would stick with a combi boiler. The only time I would swap between the two is if I was in a smaller property and was looking to save some space.
Yeah.
But you have to make sure that the water pressure is okay beforehand. We're going to get loads of comments from people disagreeing with
Yes, which kind of leads on to the next question. So the difference between a vented and unvented cylinder system, which is from Tim in Lewisham. So basically that's talking about a vented system is what you just said. There's a gravity fed system.
Yep.
So you've got a cold tank in the roof.
So the pressure is basically the pressure of your hot water or your water system is based on the distance between the cold water tank up in the roof and your hot water tank because it's forcing it down. And
then so unvented, basically a sealed system working under pressure that's feeding your hot water tank from the mains.
And so typically you come across things like Megaflow is a type of
Ariston.
Joule, another unvented cylinder. And they just run at much higher pressure, so people like them, especially in bigger properties.
It's good for lots of showers.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the difference there.
Okay, number 9. So should I get a wind turbine on my property? And comes from Hamza in Birmingham. And
no,
I'm assuming Hamza, thank you very much for that question, is central Birmingham there. So yeah, I mean that sort of answers the question there.
I would say it depends a little bit where you're based. So if you're on an area where there is lots of wind, top of a hill, not a bad idea. If you are in Birmingham, and especially in the centre of Birmingham, the obstructions from all the buildings and that sort of stuff will really impact the wind speeds.
And you might offend your neighbours as well.
And you'll upset your neighbours. So I would suggest no. There are tiny little wind turbines you can put on sheds and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
If you're going to do that as a little DIY project, then fine. But if you're looking to get any sizable wind turbine, just basically just be aware that number one, it can upset your neighbours. But number two, they produce electricity intermittently, so the wind obviously has to blow to make the electricity. They can work really well.
So basically I need a farm in the Dales or somewhere like that.
Basically, yes. Cool. That was a quick one. Who should I contact to get my gas connected to my property? It's a question we get lots as well, actually.
I had actually a couple of calls about this last week. So this is where, well, I mean, consumers may be faced with lots of different scenarios. So it could be that they're trying to get gas to the property, and then the street itself has already got gas, and for whatever reason the property has never been connected. Other scenario is the property has a gas meter, but it's for some reason it's been
Disconnected.
mothballed.
Yeah.
Or the third one, which is kind of probably the most extrusive one, is say I'm in a more rural part of the country, and you as a collective, between you and your neighbours, you're trying to get gas onto the gas grid.
Yeah, because gas is cheaper to heat your house than electricity.
Yeah, exactly. And then at the minute you've got probably oil boilers, and it's maintenance, and kind of feeding your oil tank and all that stuff. Everyone's kind of come together and wants to get gas installed. So
who do you get in contact?
So the first, so how the UK's been sort of set up in terms of so you have to basically find out who your what they call a gas distribution network, or they used to be called DSNs or something like that. But anyway, so essentially whatever part of the country you are in whether you're in the southwest or southeast, you're going to have a different company that looks after it all. Previously, the National Grid pretty much used to cover majority of it, but then over time, it's been kind of more regionalised.
If you call the National Grid, would they be able to tell you who is your person?
No, so I think they've been renamed to Cadent or something like that. So it's a different company. So, for example, if I'm in the southeast or the south of the country, which is kind of split into two, which kind of makes it even more complicated. So you've got Scotia Gas Networks, or SGN. I'm in charge of that. But then if I'm in Wales, it's Wales and West Utilities.
Ah. Okay,
So,
and then up north you've got the Northern Gas Networks,
Yeah.
and then everywhere else
Is Cadent Gas, which I think is kind of the spin-off from National Grid.
Okay.
So essentially you're going to have to find out who your gas network is, speak to them, lay out what you're trying to do, and then depending upon how big the project is, they will come back to you with a cost.
Yeah, it can be very expensive, so be wary of that.
We'll put a link to the map in the description.
Cool. Right. Next one. How do thermostatic radiator valves work?
Question for me. So
The ones I don't know, I pass on.
Thank you. So they essentially regulate how much hot water is getting pumped into the radiator. So these valves they sit on the bottom of the radiator, and you can adjust the setting from a high to a low, or from low to high, depending on how hot you want it. So obviously, the more open the valve is, or the higher the setting, the more
Hot water
is put through the radiator system. So therefore, the hotter the room will get, or rather, the radiator would emit. And obviously, if you like it more comfortable and lower, you just turn the valve down.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the, quite. I mean, it's been around. TRVs.
Well, that's what everyone still
TRVs have
normally
been around for a
uses,
long
because
time.
that's what I use in my house.
Yeah.
But they have now evolved.
Is that
right?
because I don't know, if because you've got multiple people using different rooms,
Yeah.
you might want your room to be.
Well, some people are like, yeah, some people are cold, yeah, exactly. And if you have a spare room, for example, you might just turn that off, basically turn it right down, stop it freezing, but turn it right down. And then when that room's used,
and
you
I
can
find
then
that
turn
works
it off.
when you work from home, for instance. I find that works really well, because then, majority of the people will not be in the house, like the children and stuff like that. So then you just turn you prioritize a room. So like your living room, you just work out the living room.
Exactly.
The other rooms.
Yeah, you don't have to heat as much. Yeah.
Keep
So
it down,
it's a kind of way of producing less hot water, which means energy savings. There are new thermostatic radiator valves, which are recording the temperature in the room, and then they will open and close accordingly to try and get you up to a temperature. People who make them are...
It's escapes.
So I think there's a Honeywell Evo Home.
Yes.
Have a thermostatic radiator valve which has a proper thermostat. I can't think of any others, but there are a few. But they're a really good idea, to be fair. That makes sense. That's kind of part of your heating control system, which I guess we'll discuss in more detail at some other time.
They get really fancy. You can get ones that connect to your phone, and so you can
Turn your heat radiator on from
it's a smart
to
zone
the room.
Yeah.
system.
Okay.
Right, next one. Where can I get a new back boiler?
Ooh.
You can't.
I don't think
No, you can't.
I think like 4 years ago, it was discontinued.
Yeah, so the reason we get asked this a lot again. You just can't get them. If you can find one on eBay, fine. Make sure someone gas safe comes and installs it and tests it, etc., etc. But it is very, very tricky. So apologies about that, because it is a pain to replace one of those.
So then that goes back to the other points we were talking about combi. So maybe if it's a smallish property, you'd get a combination boiler, and then if it's a decent sized house, probably go for an unvented system.
Yeah.
Some people, you can still get replacement parts for some of the back boilers if you're really, really attached to your back boiler. But I was talking to someone at Baxi who make a lot of the back boilers. A lot of people have Baxi back boilers, and they said that there's a problem with counterfeit replacement parts which break. So if you
don't
are
go on
trying to
eBay.
get a replacement part, make sure that it's
Authentic.
Once again, do not go on eBay.
Oh, so that was bad advice, was it?
Yeah.
Sorry about it. Don't go on eBay. Okay, good.
Can I get an air source heat pump for free?
So air source heat pumps, they produce hot water. It's sort of opposed to putting a gas boiler in.
Heating hot water.
Yeah, for heating hot water, they are considered a renewable energy source. Basically, because their efficiency is over one, i.e., you put 1 unit of electricity in, and you get sort of a few units of hot water, which is quite clever in theory. As such, the government pays a renewable heat incentive. So the government pays you a quarterly payment for having one of those in your place, in your house. You can get them for free, because what happens there is basically the provider of the free system will be taking your renewable heat incentive. It is very, very rare that the numbers work for that installer to.
So there might be a contribution.
Yeah, there might be a contribution. It's a little bit like, because the terms are a lot less. So when we talked about free solar panels, and you'll rent your roof for 25 years, this is kind of a similar idea, but the renewable heat incentive is only paid for 7 years. So for me, I would probably be quite anti it, because you're still potentially in that same position.
Yeah, I would, if it was me and I could take a finance product, that's what I'd probably do. I'd take a finance product and then spread the payments for the install over a number of years, and then you've got the renewable heat incentive to at least offset some of those payments. So for me, that's what I would do if I don't have the cash up front.
Yeah.
And then, speak to your mortgage provider, see if they, would offer that as part of your mortgage deal.
You can in Scotland, can't you? What's the Scottish loan thingy called?
It's called HEEPS, which is the Home Energy Efficiency Plan for Scotland. I think that's what it's called.
Okay, and there you can get loans specifically to improve various bits like this in your house. So if you're listening,
Scotland. Although in Scotland, where the temperatures are kind of lower, say, than in England, might not be as efficient.
Yeah, it might not be the way forward.
Yeah.
Because as the temperature goes down, you're taking heat, latent heat from the air. So obviously when it's cooler temperature externally, it's more difficult. You need more energy to extract that heat.
You just hate air source heat pumps, don't you?
Hate air source heat pumps.
So Mark says, what's the cheapest kind of installation for lofts? I say to Mark, episode 9 is fantastic. Episode 2 to look at, where James and I discussed all aspects of lofts and all the materials and various things. But just a summary, I would say the fiberglass.
Fiberglass mesh.
Stuff you get from B&Q. You can.
And if you buy it in September, October, they tend to have offers on just ahead of the winter, so it's cheaper then to do it actually. And there are still companies offering that for free, because there is some government funding kicking about for that. So,
but definitely check out episode 9, because we talk about lofts a lot in that video.
And have we got anything else to talk about today? I mean, because that's it from our 14 questions.
I think so, yeah. I didn't see anything major that made the energy news this week.
EcoBuild's on this week, which has been renamed as Future Build.
Yep.
Are you heading down there?
I am heading there tomorrow afternoon.
Okay.
For the ending bit, just to see what's going on.
Perfect.
But
good. Maybe you can report back next week and let us know.
See if there's any interesting solutions. Yeah.
I think that was really funny. So EcoBuild used to be, it was EcoBuild when we went.
It used to be Future Build, then it was EcoBuild, now it's back to Future Build.
Okay, but when it was EcoBuild,
it
used to take up a massive amount of space, didn't it? Because of all of the solar PV, and then the tariffs dropped. There was basically a whole hall that was just solar PV.
Yeah.
And then it obviously became much smaller. But I think as battery storage technology increases and the number of companies offering that, increase, I think the space it takes will be bigger.
So, one thing that did catch what I was just remembered it.
Oh,
so
yeah,
Tesla lowering the prices for its Model 3, which is kind of its mid-range.
It's its entry. It's the one they want people buying. It's a kind of Ford Fiesta, isn't it?
Yeah,
expensive Ford Fiesta, but Ford Fiesta nonetheless.
Yes, so that was because just so many people signed up for it initially, and then they had production problems, but then they've sort of said they've sorted it out now, so they're trying to.
I'd like a Tesla. I would like a Tesla. I think they're quite cool.
Yes.
I like the sporty one. It's also marginally outside my price bracket.
Yes.
But anyway.
And they've also said they are, which is probably not good news, they're getting rid of kind of a lot of their stores where you can just walk in and, play around with the
I
car
get that. I understand. I mean, it's expensive. It's stores.
But I like how they've said, so you can drive the first 1,000 miles or something and just return it back. And
really?
Get your money back, yeah.
Blimey. They're cool. They're cool cars. There's one opposite my house, and I always get quite car envy.
Oh.
Anyway. So that's it.
I think that's it for 10.
Episode 10 over. So we will come back to you next week. We're going to continue with our insulation masterclass.
Yes, and then and before we go, just worth mentioning where we can find podcasts.
Oh, absolutely. I don't worry. I had not forgotten about that, Nicholas.
Yes. Where can we find us?
So you can find this podcast. So obviously you can watch us on YouTube. You can find this. You can download it as a podcast and listen as you go on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio. You can get it on our website. You can go on there, and on the top there's a little thing that says podcast. You can click on there and you can subscribe. The number of subscribers are growing quite nicely.
Okay.
So I'm starting to look at the stats, and we're doing all right. So hopefully people are enjoying it and it's useful.
Yes.
We are always on the lookout for feedback.
Yes.
So if you think we're rubbish, that's fun.
Or or kind of people in the industry that want to have a chat, they can come down.
Yeah, or if Elon Musk is listening, I would love a Tesla.
Yes.
It's worth throwing that out there just in case.
Absolutely.
But that, I think, is it for number 10.
That's it. See you next week.
See you next week.